Welcome back. Now the flagship of Russia's Black Sea fleet is seriously damaged after Ukraine said that they had a successful missile strike on that ship. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is announcing a new $800 million aid package for Ukraine. It includes helicopters and armed personnel carriers. Joining me right now is Texas Congressman, House Armed Services Committee member, and Air Force veteran Pat Fallon. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. I want to get your take on what has taken place over the last 48 hours or so, where this really flagship part of Russia's whole operation here is seriously damaged. Do you see the Ukrainians winning?
You know, Maria, I don't think any of us foresaw that 50 days into this war that the Ukrainians would be faring so well. I mean, their country is suffering tremendously, of course, but the courage and the fortitude and the determination has been really something just awe-inspiring, quite frankly. And the Russian ineptitude has been a welcome surprise also. So it's possible, but we just need to continue to arm them. That's why back in November, I signed onto a letter with ranking members Inhofe and Rogers, encouraging and urging and beseeching the Biden administration to send the asymmetrical aid that the Ukrainians needed then. Unfortunately, the administration dragged their feet. They're coming late to the fight, but at least they're finally coming to the fight.
Well, I mean, now the ground is going to get softer, right? And that's going to be harder for the Russians to have their heavy equipment and be effective. How does the change in temperature change the combat on the ground in Ukraine right now?
Yeah, that's the spring in the Ukraine certainly doesn't help the people that want to go on offense, and then of course are the Russians. And I'll tell you, Maria, what is a game changer is sending S-300, which is a surface-to-air missile system that can take out Russian jets, but also the Switchblade drones that we just sent, I believe about 300 of them, because they can loiter in the sky and are incredibly accurate and can hit deep into enemy territory. So those are game changers, and we're going to see, I think, that will help the Ukrainians succeed in fending off the Russians in the eastern part of their country.
Well, that's just terrific. It's just heartbreaking to watch this death and destruction. You are a combat veteran, and you have an op-ed out on FoxNews.com where you're talking about your trip to the Romanian border with Ukraine. Tell me about that. You say that the U.S. has to continue to send the critical lethal and non-lethal aid. What did you see there in Romania?
Well, Romania and Poland and Moldova, we just got back a few weeks ago. And what I saw was heart-wrenching and heartwarming. Of course, you know, when you see really hundreds of thousands of people, you know, war refugees, mostly women and children, leaving their country, wondering whether their husbands and fathers are going to, you know, be alive tomorrow. That's the heart-wrenching part of it. The heartwarming part of it was seeing the Moldovans and the Romanians and the Poles opening up their homes to over 4 million refugees. It was unbelievable. There are no major refugee centers in any of those countries because the people in those countries have opened up literally their homes to those Ukrainian families.
I agree. It's just incredible to see that has been the strategy. I was speaking with the First Lady of Poland, and she was telling me that, you know, it's so costly and they don't have the space to set up these refugee centers. So they've asked Polish families, will you open up your home and your hearts to Ukrainians? And they said, yes, we'll do it. And they're giving these families money to do it. It's just a beautiful part of that story. I agree. Let me switch gears, ask you about our border, the southern border with Mexico, because a second bus of illegal migrants has arrived in Washington this morning from Texas. You know, Texas Governor Greg Abbott said that he's going to transport migrants who show up at the border from federal custody to Texas, from Texas to Washington. And the first bus arrived yesterday. Second one came this morning because this administration is about to lift Title 42. And that's going to end on May 23rd. We're expecting an unprecedented surge of migrants, 18,000 people a day. Congressman, how do you think this is going to play out?
Well, Maria, when I talked to the Customs and Border Patrol agents last week, they told us that when there's 3,500 illegal border crossers a day, that stretches the Customs and Border Patrol's resources to the very limit. When there's 5,000 or 8,000 in a day, there are large stretches of the border that are unmanned. I'm talking 100 miles at a time. And the cartels, the Mexican drug cartels, do this purposely because they make about $4,000 a head with every person that they smuggle across the border. So they flood a certain sector so then they can sneak across their illegal narcotics. What Governor Abbott's doing, I love. I think that we should send buses to Nancy Pelosi's mansion in San Francisco, to Joe Biden's beach house in Delaware, and Chuck Schumer's palace up in New York. I mean, if the blue states want an open border, let them deal with the consequences.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know how this is going to play out. Where do these migrants go? You know, once they're in Washington, are those people that you mentioned really going to have an impact, you know, just because they're in Washington, or are they just going to jump on an Amtrak and come to New York?
Probably, and this is what we need to do. We need to secure our southern border. President Trump turned a flood into a trickle because he had the migrant protection protocols, which said if you have an asylum claim, you will wait in Mexico while that claim is adjudicated. That was the #1 driver for reducing the illegal border crossings. Joe Biden, as soon as he got into office, lifted that, and that's what we're seeing. We've had a crisis, then a catastrophe. I don't know what the superlative adjective is after that, Maria. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we're waiting on some economic data this morning. We're going to get the retail sales number in a minute, and we'll see if inflation is cutting into it. But, Congressman, I got to get your take on the impact and the details of Joe Biden's $5.8 trillion budget, where you've got a 17% increase in spending at the IRS and tens of billions on climate change. And when it comes to defense spending, you've got an increase of 4%, which is not even keeping up with inflation. Inflation's running at 8.5%. That means you're actually seeing a budget from this president in this environment where our adversaries are rising of a decline in defense spending, Congress. Okay, explain that.
You know, Maria, it's inexplicable, quite frankly. What we're doing in real dollars, Joe Biden wants to reduce our military purchasing power by $30 billion in an environment, in a world where Iran is, a trigger hair away from getting a nuclear weapon. We have the largest land invasion in Europe since World War II. China is on the rise. And China, by the way, last year increased their defense spending by 7%. And they're trying, desperately to get to parity. And we can't have that in this world.
Just extraordinary, Congressman. We are watching all of these developments, and we will check back with you soon. We so appreciate your time and your leadership on all of this. Thank you, Pat Fallon, for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Maria. God bless.